Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the December 21st meeting of the West Hartford Community Planning and Economic Development Committee meeting to order. Before we start, I'd just like to ask for a moment of silence for the victim of last night's tragic pedestrian accident in town. So if we could just take a minute. Thank you. This morning, the town manager, as well as the mayor, and I believe our community development, Mr. Martin, are at the area where the accident occurred last night and are meeting with residents who are appearing there this morning to talk about pedestrian and bike safety. I did speak with the manager this morning. Because he's not here, Mr. Summers will present the one agenda item that we have scheduled for this morning, and we'll just call it quits after that, if that's okay with the rest of the committee. Okay. So we have the minutes from the November 16th meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Winograd. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Zanowitz. All in favor of accepting minutes as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the ayes have the motion and the minutes are approved. We'll just go right to the first item, which is the new Park Avenue Complete Streets Bike Facility Evaluation Memo. And like I said, we won't be discussing item 4, the community development update. We'll just carry that over till January. And in light of the situation and because the manager as well as the mayor are not present this morning, we'll just keep it informative, and we can keep this topic open as well till January as well, so that we'll get the presentation, we'll be able to digest what we heard, and we can move forward from there. I think that's probably a pretty good idea at this point. Okay, and with that said, good morning, Mr. Summer. Thank you for being available to assist us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Councilor Davidoff, and good morning to the rest of the committee. So the project that we're presenting this morning is our new Park Avenue Complete Streets Improvement Project. If you'll recall, we received grant funding in the total of $3.5 million for this project, essentially covering the area from New Britain Avenue up to just north of Oakwood Avenue. There's actually 2 grants in play, $1.5 million through the LOTSIP program, and then another $2 million through OPM's Responsible Growth and Transit-Oriented Development program. So as part of this, we did a study back in 2017, provided some recommendations as far as how to handle this corridor. And out of that study, that was the option that we pursued, which was to provide a road diet similar to what we have on North Main Street and provide bike lanes in both directions on New Park Avenue. So we had proceeded with that as our concept and our preliminary design. As we went through the process and started reaching out to various stakeholders, Pedestrian Bicycle Commission had some concerns with that approach. Basically indicating that it didn't go far enough to providing safe bicycle facilities. So we had a working session with them back in August, and out of that meeting, we committed to evaluating a couple other options, which we'll present to you this morning, kind of walking through how best to address the bicycle facilities on New Park Avenue. So option 1, and this should all be in your agenda package, basically provides buffered bike lanes. These would be similar to what we have on Fern Street, I think east of North Main, where it provides a separation between the travel lane and bike lane, but there's no raised or vertical delineation. So while it still is an improvement over a traditional bike lane, it doesn't provide that separation. So that was what the study from 2017 recommended. Option 2 is a cycle track or a separated 2-way bike lane. This would be on the west side of the street. So you basically have both bike lanes are together on the west side, and would be delineated by either a vertical bollard delineator, possibly even a raised curb that kind of takes it to the next level, where you are providing a little more protection from the travel lane and the bicycle facility. So with that, there's obviously some, you get some benefits, safer facility, but then there's also some negatives and drawbacks that come with that. The biggest being maintenance, and John Phillips is here this morning as well, and he can speak to those in a few minutes. But that really will drive the long-term costs associated with these facilities. It's not so much the implementation. I think any of the three options, the costs are fairly similar. It's really commitment long-term to maintain this facility. There's specialized equipment that's now required for winter maintenance, for routine snow sweeping, street sweeping, and those sort of activities that would be needed. And that's essentially why we're here today, is just to make sure that the council understands that and are supportive of that effort for the longevity of these facilities. And then option 3 is very similar to option 2, but rather than both directions of the bike lanes being on one side of the street, it's more traditional flow where you have a bike lane on each side of the street. But those would also be, both sides would be separated by your pylons, your delineators, possibly a curbing. So again, from a construction standpoint, very similar, but it does present some long-term maintenance challenges. Not that those can't be overcome, but they just need to be considered as part of this design before we actually move to construction. So with that, I don't know, John, if you want to kind of jump in and maybe share some of from the maintenance standpoint, some of the costs associated with that.
Greg, thank you. John Phillips, Director of Public Works, happy to be here this morning. Yeah, first of all, I want to be clear for the purpose of this process of understanding the options. Public Works supports these infrastructure improvements. By no way does Public Works want to come off as an obstacle to progress in any of these infrastructure improvements for both pedestrian and bike lane additions to our infrastructure, not just for this project, but all future projects that come along. But these changes, when you get into options 2 and 3, do have long-term legacy maintenance changes that Public Works would have to address, both on an equipment resource side, as well as probably most likely leading into a labor resource side. So when you get into the options number 2 and 3, because they're separated from normal traffic, because there is a delineation, whether it be bollards or a curb or a raised island, you create essentially you're creating an additional road, a pathway that has to be maintained. And then, as with option 1, nothing changes, so the equipment we currently have in house can probably handle most of, if not all, maintenance issues to some extent. But when you have that delineation, you need the smaller, more nimble equipment to get in those lanes. You need sweeping equipment to get in those lanes. And again, for bike lane purposes, a bike tire or a bicyclist is a lot more sensitive to, deferred maintenance or maintenance not occurring with the right equipment than a vehicle will have. And that gets into areas of crack sealing and just normal sweeping, right? Small pebbles, glass will find its way to the curb as it does now, but our big street sweepers can clean up an entire street. These lanes will collect that kind of debris that the faster moving traffic will push off. In between the delineators, and I'm sure you can see it if you ever go to areas that have exercise, and actually you can see in some areas of Hartford, they've had them up for a long time, that debris will collect between the delineators. And so the equipment that we're proposing that needs to be purchased have like a vacuum system with a hose, and you'll be vacuuming in between that. Those kinds of things is what we're proposing for this, is a proactive approach to maintaining these whether it be pedestrian lanes or the bicycle lanes that get built into these options. And obviously, you know, those are new tasks for the Department of Public Works and a department that's arguably already pretty well taxed out with our labor resources. And so again, our concern is our ability to perform and our ability to respond to what will be a higher level of maintenance services to address the sensitivity of dedicated bike lanes and the users that will be using these bike lanes. Again, this is only project one, but I have to imagine this will lead to, you know, connections and connections and connections, and leading up to its own bike transportation system that's well protected and thought out. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Mr. Summer, do you have anything further to present?
Yes, I'd just like to add, you know, so New Park Avenue, this is a good candidate for this type of treatment, where you have a protected facility. We've received requests in other areas of town for this, such as North Main Street. But as you can imagine, you know, with in residential areas, you have a lot of service vehicles, deliveries, things like that nature that need to occur. And those vehicles are short term, and they rely on the ability to pull over into the bike lane to make those deliveries and things. If you were to add a curb or delineation, they wouldn't be able to do that. So on New Park, you really don't have that activity. It's primarily commercial. Most of the services to those businesses occur off the street, so you don't have that same level of activity. So that's why this particular application suits this area quite well. I don't know how widespread it would be throughout other sections of town. You know, we'd certainly look to, we always strive to get the highest level of a bike facility that's most appropriate for that particular road or area of town. But this section of New Park would be suited quite well. The final recommendation, I don't know if I mentioned it, but it would be option 2 is what the engineering division and also the pedestrian bicycle commission support. So it would be that cycle track separated on the west side, and essentially that would run from New Britain Avenue up to about Talcott. At that point, the facility would shift to a side path along the west side, so it's an off-street facility. We have a little bit more room there between the Colt facility and then the West Hartford Place shopping plaza, so we're able to get them completely off the roadway. The plan, should we receive concurrence today, would be to have a working session with a couple members of the PVC just to address some of the design concerns as far as how we terminate and get cyclists safely into and out of the cycle track, recognizing that it is just on one side of the road. It's a little bit unique and would be new to the community. So we want to make sure that we do that appropriately and so that it's a safe facility for all users, all cyclists. So that's something that we'll pursue moving forward into January. Should we get a favorable response from this committee? Happy to take any questions at this time.
Okay. Do any of my colleagues have any questions this morning? Mr. Winograd.
Just thank you, Mr. Davidoff. Just one quick to John regarding the budget estimates. So just to be clear, I mean, it looked sort of at a glance, it looks like an awful lot of 2 staff for 1 lane. Your anticipation is that this would grow. You're looking forward to more lanes of that sort. You're making your staff request, not that you need 2 people to clean 3/4 of a mile of lane. I mean, that seems high. And I wanted to let you talk about, what you're seeing in the long term with that.
John Phillips, Director of Public Works. Ben, yes, thank you. Great question, and I'll be happy to provide clarity on it. It's both a reactive and proactive approach, right? So reactive is we're already understaffed to some of the improvements that have already been made, both in unprotected bike lanes, just maintaining gutter lines where bike lanes are prevalent and used frequently, as well as the 3.5 miles of off-street trails that have been installed over the last several years, with the other phases coming online in the next 12 months, 12 to 18 months as we move along those projects. So the vision would be, this staff would be to fill in the gaps of where we have labor gaps now, and the equipment would move us into a better spot to offset the lack of even additional more staff, because it's efficient equipment and be utilized not only on this bike track, but on the offside tracks throughout our center district, where we have higher pedestrian activities, where your big mechanical street sweepers are ineffective due to road treatments and things like that. So this is just something that's been sort of boiling with us. And as we continue to, on the proactive side, as we continue to see these developments come online and get favorable reviews to move forward with, and funding comes in place, Public Works is just trying to keep up with the pace of demand and the levels of service that would be expected of the West Hartford community.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm not sure if I was being recognized there or not. This is Ed Pollack, the chair of the Ped.
Mr. Pollock, I was calling on Mr. Zidanowitz. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Sorry.
I didn't know if we were going to have members of the public participate in today's meeting, sir.
All right, thanks, Mr. Davidoff. So I'm a little, I support the bike traffic and always have. For some reason, this doesn't sit well with me at all. We want to take the bikes north and south for this type of lanes. And, you know, someone mentioned it earlier too, the truck and bus traffic and commercial is very prevalent there. It's very, very busy. And we as counselors know that we have a traffic issue here in town that we have to fix and alleviate somehow. And this side of town is no exception. If we want to move bikes back and south, why is this the best option, north and south? Can we move it through the Trout Brook Trail to South Quaker and look at it that way? There's a reason that this is requested and supported for bollards, because it is so busy. As a I don't bike anymore, but I used to race mountain bike back in the day. This is not a route that I would typically take, nor would I tell my kids to take to go north and south. I would give them other options, thinking if we could move this to North and South Quaker, or South Quaker through the Trout Brook Trail system. And why does it have to be here? I don't necessarily know that if bikes are coming in here to do their daily shopping. I frequent this side of town often, and I just don't see that much. I know we got new apartments coming there, but on that side of town is Trout Brook Trail, and easily can get to the center from there and to other parts of town. So I'm just questioning why this is such busy intersection, busy road, that we can't look at other options than other than these three. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zanowitz. Mr. Summers, do you wish to respond or not?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Craig Silver, town engineer. So essentially, as part of the town's complete street policy, anytime we're doing a roadway project, we're being asked and tasked to look at incorporating not only bike facilities, but amenities to accommodate all users. So that's really where this project stemmed from. You do have the terminus of the Trout Brook Trail right on New Park Avenue. You have the two CT fast track stations. Obviously, we're looking for more and really trying to promote this area as a transit-oriented development along that corridor. So I think from that standpoint, it makes sense that we are trying to provide these bicycle facilities and promote more cycling through that area and provide a safe way for them to do that. So I can't really comment on the ridership. I don't know that we'll see significant numbers, but I think that it does make sense if you continue north from this project. The intent really is to As you get to the West Hartford Place driveway, you have the off-road pathway that I mentioned. The intent would be to try and, around Darcy and Jefferson, bring the cycle track up that way, tie it into Flatbush and Oakwood, and really develop that network and some added connectivity. So that's kind of the future phases of this project. Would be to continue to build out that network. We recognize and kind of questioned ourselves on New Britain Avenue being a state road. I don't know that there will ever be bike facilities along that stretch. But I think you got to start somewhere, and I think this is a good spot to begin implementation of those facilities.
Thank you, Mr. Summers. Anything further, Mr. Zdanowitz? I do have a few questions. So the distance from New Britain Avenue to Talca is how many miles?
Bear with me 1 second. I can find that out for you. About 2,800 feet from New Britain Avenue up to Talcott.
So if I remember, a mile is 5,280.
Right.
Is it feet or yards? I don't remember, but it's less than a mile.
Right.
Okay. So what is going to be the speed limit on New Park Avenue once we're all done?
At this point, we aren't proposing to necessarily change that. That's something we could look at as part of the project potentially. With the change in the facilities and the road diet, we could look at potentially modifying that.
Right. So right now, I believe the road operates. I think, as Mr. Dzanowitz said, is a pretty busy thoroughfare between New Britain Avenue and probably the highway ramp when you get to Flatbush. I think there's a lot of commercial vehicles there. So I do have one question. How about the conflicts with curb cuts? How would that fit in?
Greg Summer, town engineer. Essentially, if we were to do a raised curb between separating the travel lane and the two-way cycle track, essentially those would just stop at each of the driveways. So we'd have to work on the spacing of the delineators, and then the curbs would essentially terminate to allow access into and out of those driveways. Obviously, we'd also need to make sure that we're accommodating larger vehicles, trucks that would need a larger turning radius to access those commercial properties. But that would be factored into the design.
So one concern I have is whether or not we're going to be creating a false sense of security for people who are traveling at some type of speed and then going to make a turn into those driveways. Well, I understand we're protecting the people while they're going straight. Okay, it's those who are turning. You get that one chance to turn, and oh my goodness, there's a pedestrian or a bicyclist there, and that's where problems sometimes occur. So that would be something I'd want to know a little bit more about going forward. I do thank you, Mr. Phillips, for outlining and being, as always, quite objective and informative with respect to constraints of the department as we go forward. It is a labor-intensive a process to maintain these. Not forming an opinion either way as to whether or not I favor them or not, but I think it's important to understand that that's a realistic concern that needs to be addressed. The financial portion of it, the council can always decide how they're going to fund that and make that decision. Because once we went down this path with Complete Streets back, I think in 2017, or possibly maybe a little earlier, we showed a commitment that we were very much interested in having our streets be shared by pedestrians and bicyclists and motorists, and that each component of that had basically equal rights to the roadway. So, and that commitment has not changed, and there hasn't been a change in council policy. And I think that's what we've seen over the last, geez, now must be like 6, 7 years, in terms of what steps we've taken, and each time we seem to increase it a little bit more. So, which reflects the needs of our community. I do defer to my colleague, Mr. Winograd, who's a more avid bicyclist than I'll ever be. And, he brings real life experience to this issue, being, on the road and seeing what the issues are. And I would concur that, we just can't build this thing and not maintain it. There's nothing worse than having obstacles in the way when you're riding your bicycle. And someone's wondering, do you think they were going to clean this, or, how long is this debris going to be here, and things of that nature. So, but I'm certain our community is well versed on how to make contact with the appropriate people, but the response may not be immediate. So, I think we have to just really understand there's a lot of issues that go into making a change like that, and I'll just leave it there. I think it's appropriate, before I let Mr. Pollack speak, see whether or not any of the members of the committee have any objection for him to participate in this morning's discussion. Any objection, Mr. Winograd or Mr. Zananowitz?
No.
Okay, perfect. The reason I asked Mr. Pollack is because normally we don't have members of the public participating in council committee discussions, especially in this virtual type world. If it was in person, not a problem. Okay, it's a lot easier. With that said, if you have questions, sir, be glad to ask them. I appreciate the work that you do on behalf of the town with the commission that you chair, and thank you for all your efforts. They're greatly appreciated, and the advisory role that the commission that you're on has provided us with many great ideas, great opinions, suggestions. So. You're doing valuable work for our community, and it is recognized and appreciated. So please proceed, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davidoff, both for the invitation to attend the meeting and for your very kind words at the end. I do apologize for jumping in before. I'm sorry, in the virtual world, I saw somebody raising their finger. I thought they were pointing to me on the upper right-hand corner with my hand raised. After almost 3 years, I'm still figuring out the rules of Zoom, so I apologize for that. But I do very much appreciate the opportunity to speak for just a few minutes. And I just would like to share a few comments. I would just ask folks to perhaps ask themselves, what would, when roads were first proposed in West Hartford, and, perhaps there was discussion questions of, well, what would the maintenance be at that time? And I'm sure it was, what would be required to create this kind of a road system in town that we now have? Well, now that the road system is in place for so many decades and decades, there's not even any question or discussion of, well, what does it take to maintain this system of roads? And it's the fact is, it's millions of dollars. When you look at the Complete Streets annual report, the cost of installing and maintaining bike facilities is in the tens of thousands of dollars. So, there is no discussion anymore. We just, of course, we're going to maintain our roads, but all of that annual milling and paving, that's millions of dollars of commitment. I would ask, just for counselors to take a larger context of seeing, Mr. Davidoff, as you said, cyclists and pedestrians as having a rightful access to this public right of way, and that if we're going to grant that, then there's going to be a cost associated with that access, that rightful access. And honestly, I think it's, when you compare it to the cost of maintaining the transportation network for motor vehicles, it's piecemeal. It's very, very small, but still, it has to, you can't create these without maintaining them. So I acknowledge that. I would also like to share with you just that the Ped and Bike Commission ran a survey in 2021, and I believe it was a couple thousand residents responded, and we asked them, to tell us what do they think of how safe do they feel on the roads and what would make them feel more safe. And what we learned was that even with bike lanes, people don't feel safe, but the more protected those bike lanes are, the safer that they feel. So you will, I believe that the more protected the bike facility is, the greater the ridership will be. As to, why on New Park Avenue, it's admittedly, it's a very busy road. In fact, I wouldn't bike there unless even if I was paid great money. It's very unsafe right now, and that's why it's getting a complete streets treatment. And, if you remember what happened on North Main Street, how that calmed the traffic there, which was 4 lanes. Well, the complete streets treatment on New Park is going to be similar. It's going to eliminate a travel lane. It's going to put in a 2-way center turning lane. And you're going to just have 2 travel lanes, and you'll have buffering by either the bike lanes or the cycle track. So it's going to be a different roadway. It's going to be a very different cross section. So it won't be the motorway that it is today. That's important to recognize. But still, why invite people down there? Well, I point out a couple of things. It is the terminus of the Trout Brook Trail. It is now part of a transit-oriented development district that the town council recently approved. There are the CT fast track stations. There's talk of perhaps a train station there. The mayor certainly wants to see that. And as Mr. Summer pointed out, that's a critical connection between the southern terminus of the Trout Brook Trail, and then a very extensive bicycle facility network up on Oakwood Avenue that goes up all the way up to Park Road. So there's a critical section there that's missing of connectivity. And so, I do think that's an important place to consider bike facility. I would just conclude with, every time that you can allow a resident to choose to ride their bicycle to a destination in town rather than a motor vehicle, that's one less car on the road. That's incrementally just a little bit less congestion. And I think that benefits all of us. So I think the benefits go far beyond the cyclist, but to the larger community when we can make it people feel safe getting on their bike rather than in a car. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pollock. I appreciate it. I do have another question. The width of these bike lanes, should they be on the same side? Would they be wide enough that somebody was driving a motorized scooter or other type of thing would be on that bike lane and racing down it? That would be a concern. Because right now we have these ATVs that just come flying up New Britain Avenue, and they scare the dickens out of drivers. I don't think they're part of my interpretation of a complete streets analysis. Okay, sorry, but I just don't want to. You're protecting them, but here they're doing wheelies and things of that nature and causing more damage to this bike lane. So would it be wide enough that vehicles of that sort would be able to use that type of lane there?
Sure, Greg Summer, town engineer. The plan would be for if it was a 2-way cycle track, excuse me, just on the west side, excuse me, it would be 9 feet in width, so 4.5 feet, a little bit narrower than a typical 5-foot bike lane, but yeah, you'd certainly, there is that potential, that concern. There's probably treatments you could do. You could install, possibly centerline bollards at some critical junction points to limit access. But theoretically, any of the driveways to the commercial properties could potentially serve as a way for those types of vehicles to to abuse the cycle track. So that's something we can would need to evaluate and possibly work with the the working group of the PBC to address.
Thank you. I probably have more questions as we think this over a little bit more, but I do appreciate the work that's been done so far. Before we adjourn, I want to ask whether or not either one of my other council colleagues have any questions this morning, either Ms. Blanks or Ms. Pullen.
Chairman.
And it's okay
I'm
if
all
you
set.
don't. Thank you, Ms. Blanks. Ms. Bowen,
I actually do have a question, if that's okay.
please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Davidoff. I'm thinking about in options 2 and 3, you mentioned the potential removal of the bollards during the winter season. And is there a cost estimate associated with the removal and then putting them back in April or so? And have we asked the Pedestrian and Bike Commission about that? What it would be like to ride with the bollards for part of the year and without?
Greg, I'll go for John Phillips, Director of Public Works. Thank you. A great question. It would be extremely labor intensive to remove and replace the bollards. Can it be done? Sure, but it needs to be addressed. We'll need resources to do that. But the bollards themselves, depending on the decision on the treatment, they may leave little bumps, right? Because of where they lock in and then and they could be damaged by the plows riding over the top of them. So typically, I don't see that in other parts of the country that have used this type of treatment. A delineator like that to remove them for just winter operations. But it would be labor intensive and probably not something Public Works would appreciate, but we certainly would support it if that's the decision. But we would need to, again, consider with that decision, again, the term long-term legacy maintenance for those kinds of issues.
Greg Summer, Town Engineer. Just to piggyback on that, John, I think you certainly could do it, and it would lessen. The idea would it be lessen your winter maintenance. You'd be able to maintain the roadway with your standard equipment. Excuse me again. The overall, though, I don't think they'd be going in and out after each storm. I think realistically, you'd probably remove them in November and reinstall them in April. So from that standpoint, you're kind of losing that safety benefit for the better part of the year. Obviously, cycling activity probably diminishes over the winter months, anyways. But there is that concern as well. So as John mentioned, I think most communities that have this treatment opt to just leave them in year round and provide that permanent benefit.
That's really helpful. Thank you very much for that.
Anything further, Ms. Bowen? So on that note, it just generated another question because these just keep coming this morning. I'm sorry. So I guess there's also an option of retractable bollards, where they electronically go up and down. So I don't know. I'm just thinking outside the box. Maybe Mr. Phillips, you might have.
The retractable bollards work again, John Phillips, Director of Public Works. The retractable bollards do work in warmer climates. Disney World, that is very effective. The thing with an retractable bollard, just specifically the retractable, you still have to have labor there to watch them go up and down, right? Because you don't want them going up while a car's parked over it. Those kinds of things. And those are just those are procedural issues. But our harsh winters and road treatments that we use would not cooperate well with the in-ground infrastructure, and you'd probably be in a spot where you'd be doing capital improvements more frequently than you can imagine because of failures and components that would probably deteriorate away because we are in New England and we don't have quite southern weather yet.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. I appreciate your candor. While we may not be Disney World, in my opinion, we're much better.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other further comments or questions on this topic? So I don't think the committee is in a position this morning, Mr. Summers, to provide any advice. I do think this is going to require more discussion with our other colleagues on the council before we can get there, as well as some discussion from the town manager as well as the mayor. And as I pointed out, both of them were unable to be here this morning. So with that, Ms. Blanks.
Sorry, Chair, no questions. Just waving goodbye to my husband. Sorry about that.
Okay, just a rookie mistake, but that's okay. Wish him a good day. Okay, so if there's nothing further, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. I'll see all my council colleagues this evening at our council meeting. Have a good day. Be safe out there. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Happy holidays.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays,
holidays.
everybody.